Priya, could you introduce who you are?
Yes, I can. I'm Priyadarshini Rajatnam, and I'm an actress. I'm a dancer, and I also started an organization called Indigenous Collective. It's a nonprofit organization where we redirect energy towards those who energy has been taken from. And I also designed an education program called I Rise for Love Education to teach people about the marginalized, invisible experience. It's a 2-year education program, and I also have a clothing line, and we make clothing that basically represent important messages in the world. So we're walking around with reminders and having voices that are usually suppressed expressed. My family, we come from a village, and the village that we come from, we preserve ancient knowledge, we practice natural practices with life, we have our own calendar. And my particular family, we are well respected in our community, and so people come to us and look to us as leaders. So we were always the people that solved problems in the village. When people needed guidance of any kind, they would look up to us and come to us. So when when my family left Sri Lanka and we moved to Germany, and then eventually moved from Germany to Canada, we were at the bottom. You know, we're new immigrants. My parents didn't know the Western culture. We didn't know the language. We didn't understand the culture. We didn't know how to integrate. We had no one to help us integrate into the society. And so when we got here, we pretty much had to start from the bottom up, but we don't really know how to be at the bottom, because those are not the muscles that we're used to flexing for generations. It's not in my epigenetics. We're used to being leaders. So once we're forced into a more marginalized space to occupy smaller spaces in society, we actually didn't know who we are or how to be in a balanced way. So we went from occupying a lot of space in nature, walking on flat land with our bare feet on the ground, to all of a sudden being propped up on the third floor of a small apartment, being on welfare, wearing secondhand clothes because we couldn't afford to buy regular price clothes. We don't in my culture, we don't wear secondhand clothes because we believe that clothes carry the energy of people. And so we're wrapped in the energy of others. We're surrounded by people who don't look like us, who don't talk like us, who don't behave like us. They don't have our mannerisms. They don't greet us. They don't know who we are. And so society reflect to us who we are. Society is our mirror. So when we came to the West, we no longer had an accurate mirror to reflect to us who we are. And so if you don't have a mirror reflecting to you who you are, you'll forget what you look like. And in the West, we've been given a false reflection, a distorted reflection of who we are. And having been here for decades, eventually we forgot who we are as well. And we're lost between two different cultures, because in our culture, where I come from, in our village, the currency that's the most valuable is actually inspiration, which is a spiritual currency. And we exchange currencies of appreciation, gratitude, honor, respect, support, unity. These are the highest currency. My mother doesn't know how to work with money currency because we didn't work with it. It's not within our epigenetics. It's not in our muscle memory to work with this piece of paper and coins. It's like the bank system that we followed is the human banking system, where I deposit into you and you deposit into me, and we're constantly trading, but what I'm trading might not look like a smoothie. You might offer me a smoothie, I'm depositing something else into you, but it might not take the same shape, form. So that's an intuitive trade that's often not measurable by a dollar. It doesn't have a dollar amount, it's priceless. But we feel the weight of the value that's invested into us when we feel it. And so this is the society and village structure that we come from. So the experience of us trying to convert who we are and how we express ourselves in our village to transferring that over to the West, it didn't transfer over. We've had to actually accept being put in a box, in a shoebox. We were free, and this experience in the West has been very much like a prison cell. And people think, prison is when you're behind bars and there's an actual warden keeping you in there with a key around his waist. But there's different forms of prison, and when we look at our village life and how free we were to our experience here in the West of the loss of function to society, responsibility, loss of value, loss of direction. My mother, when we came to the West, tried to follow the map of the village here in the West. How can that work? Because Western energies has taught me to be quite gentle and take up less space than the space that my mother is used to taking. She grew up in the open, and she was given a lot more power than what I was able to access within myself. So naturally, if I was to go up against my mother, it's a losing battle. I'm an amateur compared to her energy. And that's where, when I went back to India through my backpacking trip, I got to activate parts of my ancient self that allowed me to now break free of the prison of my mother's narrative of the village rules that she held over my head. I had to break free of that narrative to find my own narrative, which includes the East and West together. It's a melting pot of rules that I've had to amalgamate to make life work for me here and now. Whatever got activated in me in India, I tried to find that when I came back to the West here. But this is when I got sent on this pathway where my culture was being appropriated. And so I'd look for certain signposts of my culture, symbols, words, practices, ancient knowledge that is familiar to me, that comes from my land, my ancient land, from my people. And when I started to follow all that, it took me down the wrong path, because the people who were sharing that knowledge are not the source of that knowledge. They don't know the root of where it comes from, and they're just selling this knowledge. And so it actually took me down a very dangerous path, because I was so open to receiving and growing and evolving and getting in touch with myself, that I was open to the wrong sources of information. And I realized how vulnerable I am in these contexts. Much later I realized this, but in going down that path, it actually changed. It warped my perception of reality. And it gave me an idea of what healing is that is not true to life. It gave me a fantasy perception of what's possible that's not possible right now. And for it to be possible, a lot of people need to work together and be on the same page, which is not the case at the moment. So that was sort of like something I got mixed up in while I was desperate to find myself in the demands of my family and this industry. I was looking for support in the wrong place. And that completely sabotaged my career, actually. I couldn't get back to my career after going through this experience for 8 years now. I kind of stopped working in the industry in 2015, end of 2015, and it's 2023. And I'm just beginning to be like, oh yeah, I love doing this. How did I step away from this for 8 years? Why did it take 8 years to do whatever I was doing? And I can appreciate the 8 years because it woke me up to, it took me, part of that journey took me to Brazil to learn about the slave trade there, that in Salvador, Brazil is the largest African population outside of Africa. And the people there taught me about how the African people were brought there, and that the sun would have dried up, and the salt would have dried up their skin, and how they would have been oiled up, and that for them to look vibrant, to be sold for a higher price than if they weren't oiled up. And just to like swim in that ocean where all these humans were kidnapped and brought to swim in that ocean. It's like the water, because we're made up of over 70% water. So to swim in that ocean, that body, that land, I received through osmosis. I received the download of the information that's stored in water. I received it, and it actually sent me into a deep detox in my body. And so I woke up to what slavery is. I understood it from an inside out perspective, not from a head place, not from a place of watching a movie or reading a book, but I re-experienced it within the capacity of how I could, without actually going through it myself. And I woke up to what colonization really is and the violence of colonization. I woke up to genocide and why it happens and how it happens. It's almost like I re-experienced these things, and it was scary while I was going through it, because it really did feel like a point of no return. It's like a level of pain and darkness that is not like, it's not like you're watching a movie for 2 hours and then at the end of it you could just go out for dinner with your friends and snap out of it. It's like I was in that zone, in that space for years, and I didn't really know who to reach out to, because the people that I reached out to had deceived me. So now there's a lack of trust that I have towards even asking for help, because my body's telling me, no, you're going to be misguided. And then this is where I've had to really sit in the dark with myself. I've had to sit in the dark, and in that darkness is where I found my light from within. And once I saw the light from within, it's like game over now, because I'm not looking for light outside of me. I'm not looking for anything outside of me, because I've had a living experience of finding what I'm looking for within myself without the aid of any external source. So that's the light at the end of the tunnel of my 8-year journey through darkness.